Hi everyone, it's Sierra. Thank you for tuning into this episode, and I wanted to let you guys know it's going to be a little bit different this time around. Right now, we have 2 episodes left to release for our stint at the USO. However, due to some current events, we decided to hop onto StreamYard and talk about how things have been going in our lives. This will be a sneak peek for you guys into the format of our next segment, Still Got Questions, coming soon. Hope you enjoy.
Long time no see.
Right.
Yeah.
This episode, I think we decided to just jump in and get back to our roots.
I'm Brandon. That's
in case you don't know already.
I know.
Yeah, we're gonna jump into our roots and talk about how things are going on within us and any recent news and what's going on in our lives and how things are. I think Brandon, you had some really good stuff that you wanted to get into. Some cool news. So how are things going on with you?
Yeah. I also because we're gonna call this segment "Still Friendly," which is another play on what Small Talk is Lame is all about. And me and Sierra are budding infant in our friendship bond and connection of long life friends, and we really think it's important to live our truth and live our our kind of like our culture and our legacy. So we're gonna check in with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if people have heard or read, but Houston got hit with what was supposed to be a low-key hurricane turned into multiple days of no power for a lot of Houstonians. I was one of them. I was also fortunate with friends and family to be able to leave Houston and stay at Airbnb once it got too unbearable. But
so glad, by the way, so glad.
Yeah, but a lot of people, we found that there were some deaths and things like that, and there was a lot of mixed reviews about the support and actions and delegations of how the restoration process was done and the employees, and it was just a lot of stuff. It was a lot of heaviness. But it also, one thing that I did notice is that, among the catastrophes or tragedies or big things that affect an emotional response, communities literally transform. I know a maternal figure of mine, she lived in her neighborhood, all of them had a cookout. Like all of them just had all their food was going bad, so they all just had a big community cookout. She had a generator, so her house was able to kind of still keep her fridge things. She was handing out frozen jugs of ice for people's food. People started to really live what I would say the still lifestyle by just really connecting deeper on a deeper level of support and care. These aren't just people that you live next to now. These are really your neighbors. These are really your people. It's your community. It was really interesting to see how in each part of people's devastation, how people were like, you know what, I got you, or we've got each other, and things like that. Awesome. It wasn't so superficial. So that was really cool. In addition to all of that, moving, my business, my career, just everything was in this big, remember, I think we talked about last episode, limbo, living a life in limbo when you're doing the work, or you're putting in the milestones, you're picking up each pebble to get to that mountain, and all of a sudden the ground shakes, or one pebble knocks 12 pebbles down. I think I was really tested and triumphantly traumatized in what was supposed to be the plan that turned into my purpose, because I feel like that was what was missing. I was so busy planning, and I didn't have a purpose as to why that was on the agenda, why that was the plan, why that was the blueprint. And it just, it's been an interesting switch. So much that I feel like even the energy around me changed. Randomly after we got power, I went to the grocery store, and this woman just came up to me. She's like, "You have a beautiful face."
Oh,
yeah, it was very sweet, and it was very push and pull because I felt like I was just in I was super okay. It was very stressful. It was a lot. Like, can you imagine your house being 86 degrees and you're like 10% on your phone and no plug in sight? And you've got your friend, you're my business partner, my roommate, my friend, we're just like, suffering. He has family that he was really concerned with. And it was just a lot to process, but we all had to be motivated. There had to be some type of like, let's not wallow, let's stay positive, blah, blah. So it really just got me back into that place of being like, Brandon, ultimately, it's still how you react to the environment is still how the environment's going to actually affect you emotionally. So that was a huge, interesting testament. But in other news, wow, we both have the throat, the coughies, and the
By the way, sorry, you guys, I'm actually sick. So if I have to go off camera and blow my nose or something, we'll hopefully cut that out. But have some grace.
What I wanted to really talk about was while we were off air, you had shared an interesting exchange that you've had with a friend or an acquaintance, because we started to we broke that down in our first questionnaire of like, what is a friend, what is an acquaintance, what is that like, hey, see you on Tuesday of next month type of person. And
here's the thing. I feel like acquaintance would be the wrong word, because I feel like, and I'd have to look up the definition, but pretty sure acquaintance means you don't really know them. And I definitely do know the person. They're not an acquaintance. But whether or not they're going to still be around as a friend, that's to be determined. And it's the ball's in her court. But yeah, well, to not beat around the bush, Saturday was wild. We just had a
wild is an understatement.
Well, he was shot, but like almost deadly injury. And I don't know, I was doing my due diligence. My mom had messaged me because I was clueless. Here's how my Saturday had been so far. I went to work. I thought I was going to be doing an event from noon to 6. That drastically changed last minute. And they said, no, get out of here, go home. And I was like, oh. So all of a sudden I was home and I was not where I was supposed to be at that moment. So I was doing something in my kitchen and I get a bleep from my mom on Facebook. And she was like, hey, did you see the news? Trump just got shot at. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went on the news and I was looking and watching it live and I was like, oh my God, this is groundbreaking news, because this hasn't happened since the 80s. For real. Like, they've foiled some attempts. The Secret Service has foiled some plans, but actual shootings, like, this has not happened since the 80s. So that's pretty significant. And so I was like, wow, let me just tell people, like my close circle. I messaged you, I messaged her, I messaged my husband, who was on duty on base that day. So he was kind of out of touch, because when you're on watch, you can't really be on your phone, and he's in charge of all the students. So he's just very like one track mind. I was like, hey, by the way, did you know? So I was just telling people in my inner circle. I think I did a Facebook story like, hey, tune in. By the way, something just happened. And my friend came back to me pretty much immediately. And she just wanted to have like a political debate. Like, we just had a previous president candidate get shot at. And she was like, I want to talk about this other stuff. Fuck this guy. It was just weird.
And the funny thing is I like how we like buzzwords. Like, I personally do not think that was a debate. I personally think that was a conversation of circumstance. And like, you have especially really made me more aware of like, if I do not have my own investigative factual approach of knowledge to share with a topic that may be new to me or whatever, it makes no sense to try to take a sentence and make an encyclopedia or a dissertation of thought and options, because ultimately, it does no justice to the opportunity to connect and create change and just like knowledge exchanging. Like, I didn't know this. What do you think? How do you feel? Like a real moment to bond and facilitate and just grow as people, grow as a community. Two, it really just goes against like the value of being like egoless, like when you're really like when you're really trying to be with someone that you trust and believe in and shared so much more in-depth things to talk about, no matter if it's difference of opinion, but the fact that they didn't come, it's like you showed up to the test without a pencil.
And especially further to that point, I didn't come in to start something. I know that she doesn't watch the news. She likes to be in her little world because I don't know, that's okay if you want to live your life like that. That's on you. But that's a big one. You know, I don't usually bother her with most of the other stuff, but this was big news. And so I was like, let me just tell you. And then she wanted to make it a thing, I guess. I wasn't
She wasn't. I think she wasn't, like, funny thing is this, like, she wasn't listening. She heard you, but she wasn't listening to you. And this is one of those things where I even ask you, like, is that what you would consider a friendly or friend-like characteristic? Is
Absolutely.
that something like, you know, like when I come to my friends about anything, good, bad, and different, you know, whatever, am I going to be met with them listening to me or just hearing me? And then it goes back to their mic being on at a higher volume. And then are we really connecting or are we conflicting? And I feel like that's what a lot of people do when there is a difference of opinion or moments of like, this is going to be a difficult conversation, or I'm having an emotional disguise that I don't really know how to expose, like whatever the case may be. And I think you handled it as best as you could. And you handled it with, you know, boundaries. Well, I call them boundaries, but I think it was just like, it was literally like, hey, I was just stating this because you are a friend and I value our connection. And I think this would be something that I would think would be, I trust you with my feelings about this. And it was completely met with no empathy and just a complete shift. And I was like, wait, how did she get there? And how did it mold? And then instead of it being like a dialogue, it was like this defense tactic where you're like, wait, no, okay, all right, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to let you light and love and go over there because you were not ready, or you were not what I assumed you to be in this moment with me.
Right.
And that's hard. I feel like we've all experienced that.
100%. And you mentioned before all of this, is she still a friend? And it's like, well, that's tricky. So you know me, I don't put up with a lot of stuff. If you sort of
bullshit me there.
Yeah, exactly. If there's just some things that are obstacles that seem like we can't get around, okay, fine, bye. Like it's just one of the, if we can't meet me halfway or we can't hash this out and discuss it, and even if we don't have to agree, but if we just hit that wall and then the energy changes and you're being weird, I don't need that. I'm done. Like, you know what I mean?
When we're not dialoguing, like we're not having a dialogue.
Exactly. And the funny thing is I was met with this very similarly when I was in college, because I was in college when Trump got elected the first time. And I don't remember how exactly this happened, and I might have told you the story. But somehow I told one person in a friend group who I had voted for, and then all of a sudden, like the entire group knew, and we all had class together. It was a dance class. It was ballet. And we were doing a Nutcracker rehearsal, which has lots of like lifts and interaction with partners and like, you know what I mean? And all the girls were getting lifted and all the stuff. And basically everybody looked through me at that rehearsal. They would not make eye contact. They would ignore me. And it was just like, because I had an opinion.
Well, and the funny thing is I feel like that's exactly why I think we came together. And because like I take it back. I don't hate. I find it hard because I recognize that I was once that person who's like, if it's not on Facebook, it's not news. Or how many people are talking about this one topic so that way I can seem aware or current on the buzz. And buzz isn't value. Buzz isn't your personal value about certain things. Buzz is more like, I need to fit in. I need to be seen like I fit in. I'd rather just keep my head down and collected versus individual and as my own, really self-aware. And the fact that people still cognitively, subcognitively cluster,
Yeah.
and then they just actively ostracize people for no reason of fact or truth, or like, what was the emotional response by my statement that made you so blatant with your you don't matter anymore, or like I now lost credibility, and anything, like I no longer matter to you in a way of respect or even appreciation for my very existence, and you're going to show me that blatantly.
Yeah, by looking through me. And that comes full circle because, you know, I don't hold that against them because honestly, they were a group of friends, but I wasn't close. So
No.
there's no ill feelings there. But as a human being, I can recognize that that sucked to be on the receiving end of. And so
Yeah.
now I'm met with that situation full circle again, and I have a choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can either choose to be like, you know what, we don't see eye to eye and you're not listening, bye. Or, I could try to just work it out and see if we can come to some sort of understanding at the very least. But here's the thing, I'm not going to compromise my values. That's
Right.
the end all
Right.
be all. And
Mhm.
that's why I said the ball is in her court because at the end of the day, if she doesn't want to associate with me, I can't stop her.
I feel like,
That's
we talk about passionate phrases, sometimes in certain situations with a certain type of character, like personal trait or behavior in a person, the ball is in your court is literally being like, I have now allowed you to save face on your inability to cower away from facing this head on with me.
yeah.
And
No,
now
that's exactly it.
you can self-validate however you want to see it. So now I'm either going to be the villain or the protagonist or the antagonist or the walk-on role of whatever narrative you've just now created by me giving you that statement.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm just like, it's disappointing because it creates this false sense of hope, at least for me, when I say the ball's in your court, when I know deep down they're not going to call me back.
Oh, but I'm not hanging by a thread hoping. Like that's the other thing. I got at this point. I don't want to like say emotional ties are gone, but if she really does decide to walk away, I'm not bothered. That I've
No.
I've been dealing with this for a while, so
Yeah, that was my next thing. Is like, I think we did it in the first season. Like, when do you know when it's time to stop? Stop. When does that moment trigger you, being like, okay, I have been around this dance. I have been in this real estate with you, and none of the properties are getting better. They're just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I just don't want to build anymore with you.
yeah.
And I don't have to. Yeah, it's like light and love, but there's no space at you at my table anymore.
Yep. Well, she's been a good person to me. Like there, aside from maybe ideological differences that we have, which is
Mhm.
sort of like the idea that you can't maintain a friendship if you have different ideological tendencies. That's sort of not what I would tend to agree with.
Right.
It's when they consume you so much that if you look at that person who's opposite of you and you just can't be in the room with them, that's when it's a problem. But for me, I don't mind, but also don't expect me to compromise the way that I am and what the things that I say and the opinions that I have when I'm around you because I'm not. So if she,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? So I don't I think we could still be friends. You know what I mean? Like it's not a total lost cause. This difference in belief is not it for me. Like I don't care. But she does.
Yeah,
And
and I
that's
feel like she carries it in a different way than you would ever carry an opinion versus a way of life, or a personality, or a like a what am I trying to say? But like your value, your purpose, like you're like my non-negotiables of life, how I live my life, how I want people to respect and see me. I feel like it's like one of those things of being like, this is a non-negotiable, and I'm non-wavering, and it don't try to like affect me. But I'm like, well, then that bleeds into everything else that we possibly could have, do
does.
have, and will never have. And I've had to learn that sometimes it is time to recognize when you've crossed off all three. And as uncomfortable and as difficult and as disappointing, because I feel like I do it all the time, where I'm like, I invested. I invested.
Well, see, I also have invested.
Okay. So
Probably
is your yeah.
that sounds rude. By the way, this is not to just bash this person, by the way, because that's
Oh no,
not.
I feel like we're not bashing it, but I feel like
Yeah,
actions speak louder than it's like
yeah,
we're not speculating. She
yeah.
that
We got the
it was
receipts, but
yeah.
I would say that actually no, I have invested. I there was a really funny story. I
I
won't
would
go
say
into
you
it, but
have.
I've done some pretty solid favors for her. She had a really rough move. Went through a very very objectively difficult divorce that was tumultuous and expensive and just disgusting. And like more power to her for getting through that because it was rough. Like, it was genuinely rough, and my heart goes out to her for that. And I helped her with some stuff during that time, and there were some good favors to be had. But I don't honestly, that just I just there was a it was like a see a need, fill a need, and she needed it, and I was there, and it wasn't out of my way, and I was like, why not? And I don't particularly see that as an investment. That was just,
That's you
and
being you. That's you being like if I did called you in the same way, you would do the same thing for me.
yeah,
I feel like in those moments when you are faced with like, what is this face? So what is this color you've got going on? Because I have a different palette of you, and this is muddying up all of those colors that I see in you.
mhm.
And now I'm like, well, was I painting with you, or was I just like spitting on a wall with my fingers? Like,
Well, I also have a lot of patience. So
you
there's
do. You
I
do.
I watched her come around on some other political things. Like she was originally very pro BLM. And I didn't know that, but like independently, she ended up expressing to me her evolution of that. I had no idea about it beforehand, but she was like, I
Mhm.
used to be this, now I'm this. In just a random conversation, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So she has apparently the ability to change her mind on and see truth. So
Mhm.
I'm sort of like in limbo. That's why I'm like, I don't know,
Why? Well,
It's
I feel like only because you set the pathway to allow each other to separate, gather, and then come together to discuss and have a legitimate, genuine connection or conversation, whether, just an enlightening, motivated, full of, depth conversation. And it was literally met with complete minimalism, deflection, and
yeah,
then it started to get like projecting of a personal feeling that was felt by only that person. And I was like, wait,
it's true.
this all started to turn into a singular cell of communication. And I'm like, you initially started the exchange with like, hey,
Here's some facts, by the way, just in case you didn't
yeah.
see it. Yeah,
And it was more like, no, I don't want to see it. But this is how I feel about this.
yeah,
Agree with me or disagree. And you're like,
yeah. It was a whole lot of deflection, and that's okay. The
yeah,
thing is, this goes back to the ball is in her court. So if she wants to take some time and simmer down and come back and reflect, it's okay with me. But I'm sort of just
hands off.
I'm done at this point. I'm not going to reach
Yeah.
out.
I
I'm
think
not
it's
going to waste the energy because that would be an investment. If I went chasing and was like, "Hey, I want to talk about da da da," like I've done
like
that.
yeah,
We're
like
done.
I speaking of that, I have realized that sometimes the best approach is no approach.
There you go. That's exactly.
Because I used to I heard something so good today. Um
Yeah.
but it literally, it was like two traumas,
Okay.
two traits.
Okay.
And I had been trying to personally navigate and walk through how those like what resonated in those trauma descriptions and how my traumas or whatever connected to them. And boy, when I tell you a light bulb, like when you have a like somehow all the information you read somehow did make sense, and then you get a phrase and it's that glue, and then
Yeah.
everything you're like boom.
Were these
um
other people's traumas? I'm confused. Sorry.
no, it was more like people who suffer from anxiety and depression do
Sure.
this. People have this like negative self-talk about themselves as far as feeling alone or abandoned, to have these type of psychological traits.
Oh, so you came
And
across some concepts and then something happened,
yeah,
got some glue.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I was like, oh, because I've heard the words ego. I've heard the words,
Yeah.
you know, inner child. I've heard the words of like,
Yeah.
so all those things, but the way that they were molded together, I was like, oh, this is how they fit specifically to, you know, my roadmap.
Yeah.
It was like 4 a.m, and I was like, couldn't sleep, and I was like, huh. And then that came on. I was like, gotta love my algorithm. It gave me that one perspective that, I mean, but I feel like, you know, I've said this in our last call, like for me, any type of exposure to content is with the intent behind of how and what you are allowing yourself to be exposed to. Like if you're exposed to thirst traps and hottie bodies, that's all you're gonna get. You're not gonna that's your thumb exercise. It's a bunch of pecs and abs. But
Yeah.
me, on the other hand, I just, you know, I enjoy the fact that it kind of provides perspective. Yeah.
Do you ever get sick of it? Because you gotta understand, I have so much of that in my algorithm too, because we're of the same mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I don't know if it's just because of personal experience. I have had a lot of opportunities of growth in my life over
Mm-hmm.
long periods of time with hard lessons, and I feel like a lot of the stuff in my feed, it's quick little sound bites of lessons that are wrapped up real nice in a bow, presented for 5 seconds, and it's like I've already lived that, and I'm just scroll. It's like it's annoying sometimes.
I will say yes. It's not only it's annoying, but sometimes it's repetitive.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, okay, I remember the first time the first like personal development journey and book that I read was like The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And it was a referral to me by a very good friend. And it literally was the first way I started to hear this term, design the life by your design, like your life by your design, like you taking on the actual facilitation of like, I want this and this is what I need to do. And then once I achieve it, there's another. I'm going to set another. It was the first time I ever felt like activated in my own choices, because I was always just reactionary, like, gotta get a job, gotta get this job because it's the only job I can do. I forgot did it, and like it was just like boop, 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 boop. Instead of saying, Brandon, what do you really want to do? What is really,
Yeah.
What's in that cabinet that you are like, I'll get to it in my mind.
Right.
And then that's when you know, I think that's when I started the entrepreneurial journey, and
Oh, cool.
And looked at my health and be like, Brandon, you can't do this anymore. Your like body is physically just like torturing you each time you try to live the way you used to. And once I kind of accepted and started that, I just the PD. But I will say, I did overload on personal development, because after that book, I got another book and that book and that. And it's like when you start to get these channels of like perspective, and you start to look at the world around you with this new interpretation, I got really sad, but I also got really motivated. And then I was like, I want to share this to everybody. And I'm like, and then just the fact that I was getting these weird, like, what are you talking about? That's weird. I don't do that. Like these weird, like,
Yeah.
Friends that I was like, oh my God, remember when I was talking about this crisis, or when I was talking about this thing, or this challenge, or we were having this conversation. It was just met with like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, not the same energy. That's rough.
And then, yeah, you feel like you're the crazy one. All of a sudden, there's all these tools and resources to create the change that we've all been struggling and talking about for months and months and complaining and whining. And then all of a sudden, you're just like, that's it? Oh. I can't get people to care the way that I care. And I even say that in my career, like in my professional world, I know that I can't get employees to care the way that I care, or my team to care the way that I care, but I can get them to care in some way that motivates them. But that was my journey. But yes, with scrolling, I'm like, okay, enough. I have to put it down. Or I'll find a hot guy to be like, oh, hello. Just to switch it up, I guess. But
right.
Yeah.
No, that's really key. Actually, we both learned that lesson, because this goes back into the what question was that when it came to perceiving self-worth. That's what it was.
Ooh.
How do I go about looking for that in people, or whatever it was that I was talking about that with the same friend, by the way, same person, really deep conversation about. So it's like, it's so crazy the different facets we have. But talking about that, one of the things that I realized when I was growing up, because I wrote like a big old thing about it. I told you I wrote a whole thing and I had to go back and read it and summarize it. Part of that long thing was, as a kid, according to like adults exterior to me, they would explain it this way. I just always wanted to hold people to my standard. And especially with like teenagers and stuff, it just doesn't work. And it will always get met with like rebuttals and friction and like all kinds of stuff. And it's almost like you have to learn the art of getting people to sort of fall in love with whatever they like you need them to be doing. And Steve Irwin had a great quote. He was like, if you could get someone to fall in love with the animal, like take care of it, because he was all about saving the endangered species and things like that. And it's not about government coming in and making all these mandates. It's not about communities just doing something for the sake of showing face or like the virtue signaling. It's like if you get individual people invested in genuinely loving that animal, they'll take care of it and everything else will work itself out. It's the same thing. You have to get people to sort of fall in love with the animal and then they'll just do the right thing. And that's the cool part. And so instead of because I do that a lot in my life. That's how I live. It's very intense. So if I can sort of just get people to love the animal, if you would, then it makes things easier and it doesn't feel so tyrannical, you know?
Yeah. No, I heard something. What I got and what I like immediately went to was like finding people on a similar frequency as yourself. And then your favorite podcaster author, and podcaster, I cannot remember his name to save my soul.
Peterson?
Yes. Before we got on the call today,
not my favorite.
Well, I remember that was the first person that you were like,
yeah.
Right before we got on the air, I heard his like a little short where he says, pain is paralyzing. Pain is the one thing that you can't argue away. Pain is the only thing, is one of the heaviest emotions that we have to overcome. And you want to know how to solve it. And he was like, love, like really truth and love are also just as powerful as pain. And he got emotional in that little moment. And I was like,
Oh, I know that clip. I love that clip.
Yeah. It was like right after that, my aha moment. And then that happened. And I was like, okay. And of course, for me, of course it created this discomfort because it's like love and truth sometimes are like, I'm still understanding and working through this, because Simon Sinek was like, truth doesn't have to always be shared in the moment. There's always a perfect platform placement and timing for it, because maybe that person, place, or thing is not in a state to really receive that truth in a way that you intended. And I feel like when love and truth have to kind of meet somewhere, I think they do need those accents to ensure that it comes together, because then you'll go right into either love or you'll go right into the truth, and then that leads into defend or deflect and all this other stuff, I feel like.
Yeah.
So I feel like this last 2 weeks has been testaments, traumas, and trials of like knowing, like seeing the plan that you worked on, seeing every day, adding a new line and a new diagram and a new thing, and then actually seeing a completed map and then being like, okay, now you have to go. Now the road is there. And for me, that's where I'm at. Like, it's terrifying, but it's also it's tricky, because I'm still in this place of like making sure. But
right in the middle.
Yeah, it's like, this is what it means to begin to start to ask the question of putting yourself first, and what does that look like for you, and how you can, streamline a friendship shift or a connection shift, like from roommates to friends and colleagues, and all those feelings come into place. I'm really it seems so foreign to me, even though it's not foreign, because we've all gone through it. We've lived with that. We live with our best friend. We live with our roommate, and then we find our own house. They get a partner or whatever. We separate. Like all my friends did that. I remember when I was younger, all my friends were getting married and then having babies, and and I was like,
well, this is, to be fair, this is a much longer one overall. Like I think the time period that you guys have been in this situation is a bit longer than most. So I get that.
I think not only the length, but also the tenacity and tendencies and track record and unknowns and pathways have really, I think, challenged us both. I thought I'd sneeze. I do, seriously. And I feel like it's when does it stop being a lesson into a legacy?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of good things lined up for you, because it sounds like you have new job opportunities and you got a new living situation, which is key. And all those two things put together sort of change how we are going to go about this podcast and like do other things.
Yeah.
It's all one giant shift that you're just like right in the middle of.
Well, yeah, I feel like it's no longer like it's in the middle, because it was either on one side or the other.
Yeah.
And now, instead of it just doing this, it's kind of going like, okay, now you can move it. And it's really weird. I feel like yesterday I felt like the cosmic permissions were allowed to be, accepted.
Nice.
And in a weird way, because you can like, okay, I know, like, feel something is about to, there's a rise of channels, there's too many sparks going on, and I can assume what they are, but it's
now that it's actually here, it's like, oh wow.
Yeah. And I had to choose and then decide, saying, okay, this is now the spark that I have. I'm going to use this to create a charge and show the light through my path. Once I do that, you can't pull electricity once you activate it.
Right.
So, and then it just got me to focusing on all the other stuff that I have and want to do. Also, our company dynamic is going to change pretty soon. Not pretty soon, but for the next year. I think I feel like a lot of reflective and just trails of transmission, truth, and triumph are underway. Only because, when you get out of your own way, or when you remove the wall of whatever resistance it is, you allow things to finally find you and be seen and come through. So it was really interesting, because I pulled tarot for all the people that I was thinking of, and it was literally like, huh. And then mine was shocking, because I was so scared of being like, my question always is when I have to make a drastic or really selfish or selfless shift only for myself, I get so worried about what that ripple effect will do to the community around me, because I'm so not used to choosing just myself for myself by myself, without it being a negative self-escaping type of thought process, where I'm like, okay, I'm overwhelmed, or I'm at max capacity, my charge is gone, my battery is dead. If I do not sit at this thing and charge 100%, I will just constantly be at 2%, and you don't get much out of me at 2%. I will die within 2 clicks. So it's just a different moment. It's just a different feeling, I would say.
You said something really interesting, and I think I knew what you meant, but you said basically that you were hesitant to make big decisions more because of how that might affect the people around you, rather than what
that's my inner people pleaser, because I validate my feelings by how others have felt with either my presence, my time, my work, my commitment, my whatever.
But
and
you have a life.
Huh?
You have agency though, and you have a life, and so I think that's very
even in that, and that's the thing, even in that, I realized I wasn't still fully transparent in how I
yeah.
navigated my experience, my goal, my worth, my things like that. It was more like, this is what it is, and it is all in support of course, me and the company. But my focus, my tunnel vision was like, well, how can it make this platform? I can worry about everything else, but this is always the destination, and it clearly wasn't. Clearly isn't the right methodology when you're building a business,
Definitely.
and
That's
and
yeah.
when I had to start to look at what that shift should look like because of what worth looks like to me, worth looks like to them, it created a different space and a different conversation and a different energy. That it wasn't until later that it was like it kind of, I think the seed kind of sprouted sprouted like actual leaves and became something more floral than poisonous. So
Where do you think you learned that from, though? Because it's very self-sacrificing, and that's not an easy thing to live out every day of your life for, especially not just for your personal, but for your professional life as well. Like that's very taxing. Where did
so
that?
that I feel like that that quote today of like your childhood trauma. So like when I was a kid, um I know that, and I've been trying to like start, I found this really great woman who had like these lists of questions to ask your inner child. And one of the places that I keep going back to is when I was younger, I sometimes was intentionally and even blindly opposite. Like even down to like some of the games that I would create together with my cousins and my sister, but I was a little bit more detailed. I was a little bit more like intricate. It sounds really corny, and I'm pretty sure if they're watching, if they ever watch this, we created this game called World,
Okay.
where we were like in the real world. So we would make tons of fake paper money. We would section off our bedroom into like little apartments, and one would be like a school teacher, so they'd have like a little classroom. Like we would create like the hallway would be like the street, and I'd make a fake ATM that had all the. It was crazy. Like we spent hours
Wow.
making paper food and groceries. Like it was a lot for a bunch of kids
I
in
love
the city of Chicago. But in the summer, the house, we had more of the house. So then I would take the sun deck, and that would be my apartment. And I would be like, I'm gonna make a couch out of 2 chairs. And my friends, they'd be like, Brandon, what are you doing? Like, it's this. I'd be way too,
Oh,
I was.
so you said opposite, but you meant that you just took it a little bit more seriously than the rest.
Yeah, I wasn't a part of like, how like your friend was like, I'm the collective. See,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm always gonna stand over here because I'm always gonna be like, well, this makes sense to me, but that making sense to me literally was not the collective, down to the music I chose, down to
Right.
the things that
Oh,
showed.
you were okay. You were opposite mainstream.
Oh
You
yeah,
were okay. So you were, yeah, you were a fish that swam upriver all the time. I got you.
yeah. And then what that did was make it very confusing for the collective to be like, well, so
So
like I feel like I was loved, I was supported, and I was happy, and it was a great childhood. But there were some inner things that I just felt like were disconnects because of just who I was as a child and emotionally. And then
oh,
after my mom died, it really was taken to a different place where it's like, if you don't fit in, you don't fit.
okay.
So you have to sit on the shelf, or you have to create your own kiosk of coping, care, connection. So I feel like that was what led to this whole like self-sacrificing, because you're watching everybody on this side in this tent, lights on, booming sound, noise, and yeah, you have this little bed sheet, and it's yours, and it's fine, and it's sheltering, but you can feel this pull of being like,
Hmm.
huh. So there was a lot of, well, maybe I need to tone it down, or maybe I need to just get over it, or maybe I am doing too much, or maybe I'm not enough, or da da da. It's the not enough thing that I just developed over time that led me to being like, okay, I just need people to accept me for however they want to accept me, you know.
So it was
I mean,
almost like
shrink.
it was an overcompensation to minimalize. That's interesting.
Yeah, or shrink. So because I didn't want people to feel like I was ever going to get in their spotlight, because I didn't think, you know, if I'm going to really be there for this person and show them that they are important and they matter to me, I don't want them to ever feel in conflict or in competition. I remember one of my best friends for years, you know, even when we go out into the and go to the clubs and be in public, and you know, both two single men, but I would never be as present, even though I could tell like that person thinks and that person's trying to flirt and I would only just be like, no, I'm good. I'm just gonna sit over here, and I would just watch them tackle it up. And then one time I was kind of like, enough. Okay, nope, can't do it. And it changed, and I think that was the change. That was the moment that whole channel shifted.
Interesting. That's cool. I think so my own perspective on that, the whole so you would allow other people's like possible reactions to your decisions kind of influence the way that you made decisions or their lack of. And I would say the opposite was true for me.
Oh, I could tell you were definitely like, excuse me.
Well, because we had the same problem. I was just like that when I was a kid, and so I was very bull in the china shop, and I just didn't stop.
And I feel like you did stop, because I feel like you have a way of being like, hey.
I finessed it. I honed it.
Yeah, you went from a bull in a china shop to a librarian being like, shh.
Well, so it's tricky, right? Because I didn't have the typical upbringing. I didn't have school. I didn't have like I went to school. I didn't have public school.
You didn't have the teenage angst. Yeah, you didn't have the angst of like the Mean Girls, the plastics, the bitches.
Right, I had none of that. No. And I think because I didn't have any of that, I didn't learn to let peer pressure and other people get to me. Because
you got the stuff that I didn't get until I was like 30.
But it's not because I was like hardened to the point where that stuff didn't affect me. It was like I think there was genuinely some developmental milestones that, because I was shielded from that because I was homeschooled, not shielded like my mom was like,
exposed.
I'm gonna keep you away. It was
you just want exposed. Yeah.
And none of that affected me during those key developmental frames in my life. I grew up without those stigmas. And so as an adult, those things affect me much less.
Yeah, it's almost like how you feel like manifestation is just like, fuck that, it's discipline. It's like you understood it as like, no, that's just discipline and routine and practice and da-da-da. For me, it's like, no, it's gotta be this activation energy. And you're like, fuck all that. It's discipline, dude.
Yeah.
Just do it. And do it every day.
Just do it.
Or just keep doing, like keep on this thing, you know. So it's like a matter of opinion, but it's still just a matter of how one maps to the other map. You like, I use Google Maps, you use Apple Maps. It's still gonna get you there. So
hopefully. I don't know. I don't like Apple Maps. But no, I hear you. No, it's interesting how the different upbringings can like just very similar people as kids, but the different external circumstances just you know.
Yeah, and we both love psychology. I am starting to really love the psychology behind like the things that I just was like, okay, maybe that's just me, or that's just my personality, or that's just who I am, blah, 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 blah. But when I really started to, it wasn't until like I was living in Milwaukee with a great friend and their family, and you know, mental health was never a thing that was even vocalized in my upbringing. Right. You know, emotions were either you're hurt, it better be broken, or you want something to cry about. Those were the emotion. That was the emotional library of a child and a preteen and then a teenager. It wasn't until like college that I was like, oh, emotions, stress, anxiety, depression were things that I didn't really even categorize. So, I mean, I think it's interesting that now that I'm starting to really ask myself very difficult questions and linking them to childhood traumas, because I went through a lot as a kid, and seeing how those have mutated and evolved into, things that I'm like, oh, I would have never assumed or connected those dots to that lineage of
Mm-hmm.
life. So, and since I love psychology so much, it's like, oh, okay, that's what my brain's doing. So yeah.
That's some good stuff. I was thinking of something kind of sort of similar, like how you're having these revelations about stuff from your childhood and how that links into adulthood. I was just thinking this morning, I don't remember exactly what got me on the topic, but this is like a little side tangent, but I was like a really literal kid growing up, and I was thinking about how learning about the stuff in psychology now as an adult, I don't know if I would have been able to appreciate it enough if I hadn't oh, that's how I got it. If I hadn't read this one book series. You asked me a question a couple weeks ago. What was like a book or a piece of art or
Oh,
anything?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thinking about that question, I was like, what would it be? It was this book series. And it sort of links to everything that we're talking about. So this book, this is the Left Behind series, which I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a Christian-based fiction, technically novel based on the book of Revelation in the Bible, and
Okay.
it's really cool. It's not even about like Christianity. It's not about having a religion or a belief or anything, but it's the fact that they took a book of the Bible, a really wacky one at that. Like if you actually read the book of Revelation, that is wild. All of that stuff that goes on in there, all the imagery and the symbology, and it's nuts. And so to have a book series based on that, what they do is it's doomsday. You know what I mean? The rapture has happened, all of this stuff, and it's going down, and you got the geopolitical stuff going on, the politics, the dictatorships, the personal relations, and all these book character like the people, and it just plunks you right down in the middle of it, and it's really impactful, and it takes all of the nutty symbolism and imagery that is used in the book of Revelation and translate it into kind of this author's interpretation of what that might look like in the real life, you know? And it was just like, holy moly, my literal brain exploded because that sort of unlocked my ability to recognize symbolism. Up until that point, I was not able to interpret it kind of the way that you were like, I couldn't interpret the other emotions. I had no idea until I was in college and like all this stuff, But I think if I hadn't had that pivotal moment with that book series when I was really little, my interest in psychology would be different, and I wouldn't be able to see a lot of the connections and stuff like you're making now as an adult. None of that would have been able to happen if it weren't for that book series. So that was a cool realization I had this morning.
Yeah. You know me, the master of metaphors, making a metaphor out of everything. I think just like in certain religious or faith-based practices, I feel like we all have access to all of those callings and channels of worship, faith, power, energy, whatever you want to call it. My biggest response was like, we either answer the phone or we let it go to voicemail. We never delete them. But whenever it comes to what resonates with us as far as like our higher power, our calling, or a God of our understanding, or whatever the case may be, they're all on this one channel, and each time it rings, you can pick it up and it's this, or the other, but they all leave a voicemail, and they all are there and available for you to hear, listen, and expose yourself to. It's just up to you to choose. And I think the same thing happens when you don't pick up the phone. If you listen, if you pick up nothing, then you are exposing yourself to only what you can, what is actually happening moment to moment, until you allow something else to activate a different perspective or a different, I don't agree, but I will follow this. I will follow this as far as I can. I'm willing to put on a different shoe.
That sort of adds up to what we had been talking about briefly with the algorithms, right? If you don't answer the phone, then eventually all those notifications build up. you know?
Yeah.
And then when you do decide to face that monster, so to speak, it's you all at once rather than doing it piece by piece. And so I think this was connected earlier. It made sense. I'm trying to think of how that was. It made sense in my brain. But I feel like the more that you go out and actually experience life rather than just trying to stay in a bubble with whatever you feel like is your proper understanding with whatever.
Your
If
reality versus the real reality of the world. Yeah.
exactly. If you go out and live, it's going to not desensitize you, but like when you get
No,
met with things, it's easier to process them and you can have these deep conversations and it's not so binary. Like you can recognize the middle ground, you can have connection, and it's I don't know. I think the people who don't get out and live life, those are the ones that also will have issues coming to terms with those things that sort of shock their reality. They'll have because all of those notifications just came in all at once,
mm-hmm.
and that's
And
genuinely hard to deal with rather than taking it piece at a time.
well, I think it's also that it's like recognizing like, okay, this is a lot of it. It's a lot to download.
Yeah.
And I know myself, if I try to download all of this at once, I will not technically be downloading. I'll just be just, okay.
Mark has read. Mark has read.
Yeah.
Mark has read.
Yeah. And then when it's time to kind of like be present with someone, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that sentence. And then I'm gonna try to like, you know,
Yeah.
swim. And I'm like, we're not swimming. We're actually on a jog. So why do you have your swim trunks on?
100%.
So I feel like,
I like that one.
see, there it is.
That's good.
So I feel like as we get out of the pool or get back on the land, I feel like this is a great way for us to kind of be like, this is what that's what's been going with me. I feel like I've been talking the whole time. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I feel like we've both been at it. I don't know. It's been entertaining. This whole maybe you have been, but I liked it. It was great. You had
No,
updates. I didn't have any
I mean,
updates.
that's true.
Oh,
I was in a hurricane and then
yeah.
I was, I don't like to, I'm trying to get to the place where I'm not like, oh my God, I had a lot of drama. Cause I don't think it's drama. I think it's just, I have a lot of things going on.
You do.
And
My
that's
drama
okay.
was just that one thing with my friend, and that was
It
it.
wasn't even drama. It was more
My
like
drama.
I feel like I've started to change those phrases, being like when I'm faced with something, I'm like, huh, interesting. I'm like, wow, that would have been drama if I tried to spread it and be like, someone see my point of view, or you got to see that she's crazy, right? You got like, come on now. Instead
Yeah.
of being like, oh my God, what an interesting experience that you had, and yeah. Well, I can relate to how you would feel because I personally feel that this and this.
Mhm.
But yeah, to go way left and then way right and then park, it's like, what are you doing? Why are we even driving? Like, where did you get in the car? So anyway, but I feel like
Yeah.
this was a good way for us to check in. I mean, and for our viewers and listeners, I mean, I feel like I know we are so not the norm, and and we have really we we just kind of fly by our own feather, and I don't think we've even checked like
Check.
our community and seeing like what we've gotten. So I feel like this would be a good way for us to say, hey guys, as we are in the middle of season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you guys thinking? Because I feel like we have a lot more things to go over and talk about and expose ourselves to. I have some really cool stuff coming up for July and August.
Oh
I
yeah.
had some really cool ideas that I think I was like, ooh, we should try this and we should try this because I'm playing off the whole still thing. So like I'm like, still working. What about work things? Still
That.
broke. Like all that kind of stuff. Like,
But like guests too.
yes.
Who exactly did you want to try to bring on? Because you said
So I'm trying. So like, I remember how we talked about the difference between an acquaintance and a friend.
Yeah.
And also investment and reciprocity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm like asking myself,
Oh, is this the right choice?
and is it going to be serving to what our core is versus just like doing it for the sake of doing it? Because it's almost like when I started my brand, it's like, oh, I'll look at it and I'll buy it, and they never do. because their intent to support you was not to support you because they didn't really like it doesn't resonate with them. It's not their style, but they love you. And I'm like, well, don't do that. Like if you don't like to wear it, don't wear it or don't buy it if it's going to sit in your closet. So yeah.
Well, that'll be good for us to talk about offline.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm curious what kind of like, God, this will probably be August when this particular, maybe September when this episode gets released. But if you guys have ideas about guests that you would like us to bring on and have a conversation with, we're open. We will talk to literally anybody. And I almost called you Andrew. Oh my God. That's at the dojo. Brandon knows 100% that I am fearless and I will reach out to any single person on this.
So fearless.
I will do it. And I'll make it happen too. So you let us know. You let us know.
And then also, I mean, not to like put the horse before the cart, but season 3. You gotta start thinking about
I can't wait to get back in person filming because this stuff is been good. It's just different when it's not.
I miss her face. I miss her being right there, being like, you goofball. Yeah. So but until then, I am Brandon, and this is Still Friendly. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.